Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. And I'm going to start out today with an advertisement for small churches. Most actual local churches are small. By small, meaning having an average attendance of under about 100 people a week. Many are a lot smaller than that. And that's all right. That's good. In fact, I want to argue. A lot of the churches that advertise online or that end up sending postcards to your mailbox or that grab headlines are what we call mega churches. And a large number of people go to them, and they're able to provide a lot of, let's call it consumer service. And their services, when they have worship services, are splashy, bands, drums, all sorts of things. But are they worship? And what is a church? I'm going to leave the musical style aside, and I'm even going to leave the theology aside for now. But if a church is a fellowship of people, they can get too big. I need, and I think most people really benefit from smaller groups. The large churches will try to get everybody into what they call a small group, and that's wise, because it is in small, coherent, familiar groups that people develop the kind of trust that allows them to look out for one another, to understand one another's needs, and to understand each other's spiritual lives as well as their own. It's in the small groups that people learn what it means to love folks who, on first appearance, may be unlovable. It's in the one-on-one interactions that take place over a long period of time that people come to understand human nature and understand the interaction between human nature and God that is absolutely and intimately a part of Christian faith. It's what we call the incarnation. Maybe it should be called the interaction, but the incarnation. God becoming human in Christ. God living among us. And us living with one another is part of that. And it is in the smaller groups and the smaller churches that you really see that. It's where people cannot hide. So get out there. If you're not going to church, get out there and go. But don't look necessarily for a large building. Don't look for something that seems to be popular. Find a group that needs you. Not that you necessarily need. A group that needs you. A place where your own gifts can be put to work. And that's when you will find it comes back to you. And you yourself grow, along with the people around you. So that's my message for the opening of this service. And stick around now for the rest. See you in a moment. The Bible reading this week is from Genesis chapter 28, beginning at verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a stairway set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head, and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Jacob was on the run from his brother Esau. Esau had sworn that he was going to hunt Jacob down and kill him for some of the things that he had tried, some of the ways in which he had robbed him of his standing and of their father's blessing. If Jacob could reach Haran, which was the land that Abraham and Sarah had left 2 generations before, and if he could find there his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, he would be safe, at least until Esau figured out where he was. But for now, that was where he was headed. But until he got there, his life would be in danger. A couple of years ago, right here in our own area, remember how there was the murderer who had escaped from the Chester County Prison? And how he was on the run for, almost a week, being hunted down all the way from Longwood up to Warwick, from Chadsford to Nantmeal. Picture Jacob in that kind of situation. Remember how that man was looked for in every inch of underbrush that the FBI could reach, and that the state police had closed all sorts of back roads trying to find him until they did finally nab him. Jacob was in that kind of situation, obviously not exact, but close. And I can just picture the point where that man lay down under a bush and tried to get a short nap. And I can picture Jacob running as fast as he could. But there still comes a time for any fugitive when exhaustion overcomes fear and they have to sleep. And that's the moment where we join Jacob. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. And taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and used it as a pillow. Can you imagine being so tired that you would use a stone for a pillow and still nod off? In that kind of a situation, how well do you think you'd sleep? As much as your body would shut down, do you think your mind would actually do that? I'll just speak for myself here. I'm one of those people who falls asleep easily, pretty much any time. Generally, 10 o'clock or so rolls around, and I have had it. My eyes go on strike, and my eyelids droop. Once I've had some measure of rest, though, whatever the previous day had held, or whatever I might be expecting for the day to come, that filters its way into my thoughts and into my dreams. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens. I might have had a flat tire, and I'll start dreaming about donuts or something, flotation devices, float rings. I might get stuck on a crossword puzzle hours before I went to bed, and I'll have a dream about Scrabble pieces and trying to put them together. Or I might dream about being in a room with black and white tiles all over the floor, trying to put them in place or trying to step from one to the next to the next. My mind does weird things. Most people's minds do weird things. And sometimes I'll wake up with a to do list already composed and 10 minutes to go before the alarm clock goes off. And I really resent that because it feels too soon to get up, but too late to get back to sleep. So, yes, in what I'm about to say, I am projecting, taking my own stuff and describing it as Jacob's, but I still don't see how he could have slept and how he could have dreamt without turning his own situation around and around and around in his head, no matter how tired he was. What lay behind him? What lay ahead of him? How would he get from point A over to point B? And would he survive all that stuff in the middle? Esau, he might be around the next rock. Now, one word of caution here before I go further. Not every dream that everybody has a deep significance, nor is it necessarily tied to what's going on in a direct or even a positive way. My father worked in a Veterans Administration clinic where it would not be unusual for one of the patients to walk up to the staff psychiatrist and ask Dr. Lipton, I had this dream last night. What does it mean? And for Dr. Lipton to reply, it means you shouldn't eat ice cream before you go to bed. Not everything is going to be a great revelation just because it comes to you in the middle of the night. But at times of severe stress, like the one that Jacob was under, it may be that only when the physical necessities, the necessity of sleep, comes upon you, do you have to slow down, and are you able to make some sort of assessment of your situation? It may be, as I think it is safe to say about Jacob, that only when he had to slow down, whether he wanted to slow down or not, would he be paying enough attention to anything other than his fear to hear what God was saying to him and to hear that over the noise of his own thoughts. And what God was saying was this: Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done all that I have promised you. He needed to hear that, but maybe only when he was asleep would, would his heart have been listening. In the midst of external danger and internally a potential nightmare of fears, God found opening, that one opening he had into Jacob's heart through, in this case, a dream, and used it to say to Jacob, get a grip, hang in there, you're safe with me. Apparently, Jacob had never fully realized that God is God, not just of the beginning of the journey, and not just of the destination, but of the trip itself. God of the entire thing. And when that light dawned on him, he was amazed. It wasn't that God was simply where he had grown up and learned about him. It wasn't that God was simply way off in Haran where Abraham and Sarai had met him. He was in between too. Jacob woke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? No longer afraid of Esau, but in awe of God. Big difference, big switch. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Now that's a far cry from, oh no, I'm going to be caught and killed. And Jacob named the place where he had his dream vision Bethel. 2 words together. Beth, house, El, God. He named that place the house of God. It's not an accident, by the way. This is a side trip, but it makes sense that a lot of AME, African Methodist Episcopal churches, at least the older ones in our area, this part of the country generally, are named Bethel. In the decades just before the Civil War, fugitives from slavery running from people who might kill them when they found them or return them to a life that was like death would find at a Bethel, a house of God, a place where they could, for a moment or two, have some kind of safety, some kind of rest. Bethel. It's not a destination, but a gateway, which is what Jacob discovered. He hadn't gotten where he was going, but he had to pass through this place to get there. A place where it becomes visible that there are others traveling the path to help. Angels going up and down between where you are and heaven. That there are aids along the way, places of safety that can help you keep going in the right direction and let you know you never travel alone. Anne Lamott, in her book Traveling Mercies, tells of a time when she was going through one of those dark phases of her life. She had lost a close friend, and She and her son, who was then 2.5 years old, had a chance to take a brief trip to a Mexican beach town for a very short break. And in the place where they were staying, there was a circus school. As Bishop Peggy Johnson often said, you can't make this stuff up. But there they were. They were in Mexico, and there was a circus school. And that's where this incident happened to Anne Lamott that she records. She says, "There was a man here this time with just one leg. I'd seen his prosthetic leg lying around him by the pool a few times before I actually saw him. And when I did, I saw him climbing a trapeze ladder in the circus grounds. He climbed the ladder with disjointed grace and asymmetrical but not clumsy, rung by rung, focused and steady and slow. Then he reached the platform, put on his safety harness, and swung out over the safety net, his one leg hooked over the bar of the trapeze, swinging back and forth and finally letting go. A teacher on the other trapeze swung toward him, and they caught each other's hands and held on while they swung back and forth for a while. Then he dropped on his back into the safety net and raised his fist in victory. 'Yes,' he said, and lay there on the net for a long time, looking at the sky with a secret smile." She says, "I approached him shyly at lunch the next day and said, 'You were great on the trapeze. Are you going to do it again?' And I had this idea that he might, so that I could do some serious writing about spirit and guts and triumph. But all he said was, 'Honey, I got much bigger mountains to climb.' And by the way, the chapter where Anne Lamott tells this story is called Ladders. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, soldiers of the cross.